got a beautiful day here at Lock 31, and I'm standing in front of the full-size replica of a D&H Canal boat. These plied the canal during the later part of the 19th century, from about, well, the canal was open from 1828 until 1898, a 70-year history, and at any time of the season there would be 1,000 of these boats on the canal, possibly up to 1,300. They hauled 140 tons of coal, and they were manned by a captain, a mate, and a mule boy, a boy that tended to the mules. Anyway, we got the idea for the boat because we also have the house, and the house would not support large groups of people. So we needed some place to, if a bus came to the site, we needed some place for people to gather. And so we came up with this idea of a pavilion, and then we also wanted to give the public the sense of how large these boats were. And you can tell people how big they are, but they just don't get the sense of it. We'd drawn the boat out on the ground, and it looked big, but it was nothing like this. And since we've finished this, people driving by see it, and they do a double take and pull in and check it out. But anyway, it's a full-size replica, and the main cargo was coal, and it was the coal that came over Moosic Mountain and down the Gravity Railroad to Honesdale, and in Honesdale it was loaded onto these barges, and then it was a 5-day trip to Kingston, New York, and it was through 108 locks, 108 miles, and it was a 5-day trip there and a 5-day trip back, and there were actually millions of tons of coal that were transported this way to feed the New York City demand for energy. Before, in the early 1800s, New York was importing coal from England. If you can imagine a sailing ship coming across the ocean with a load of coal and then turning around and going back, you know, there's probably a 2-month voyage, and it was a soft bituminous coal, and the engineers that came up with this plan were able to deliver anthracite coal, which is a hard, clean burning, relatively coal, and it allowed New York City to grow from, in about 1820, New York was 240,000, and by the end of the life of the canal, it's 3.4 million. In 70 years, it grew that much, and it was only because of the coal. Every tree around us that you see would have been cut down. There would have been no trees, and they needed some source of energy, and the Wirtz brothers had found this load of coal, this deposit of coal around Carbondale, and they came up with this idea to move the coal to New York City via canal. To me, it's a engineering marvel, in that it took them 3 years to build this 108 miles of canal and the 108 locks. It was essentially 2,500 Irishmen who came and dug the canal, laid the stone. It was all done by hand, wheelbarrow, mule. They did have mechanical lifts, but still, you think of how much stonework there is in this 108 miles, and it just blows your mind away. And the Irish were perfect for it, because if you've ever been to Ireland, they have these stone. They've collected stone over thousands of years, and there's like every 50 yards there's a stone wall that goes to infinity. And so they were quite used to working with stone, and when they got here, that's what they did. This would have all been original growth forests, so the trees would have been extra large. The removal of the stumps was a big obstacle at first, and they used to be able to remove 4 stumps a day. If you imagine all the trees between here and Kingston, it would have been slow going, but they came up with this machine that was like 16 foot high and these double wheels, and they were able to use leverage to pull these stumps out, and they ended up being able to pull out 40 stumps a day after they developed this machine. So the ingenuity of how to move the rocks, how to get rid of the stones, how to dig out the ditch, it's all an engineering marvel. Part of our story here is to tell how the people lived in the canal boats, and this is a replica of a canal boat cabin. It was below deck. It's roughly about in the position where it was in the boat, but it would support. If it was a family, it could be a family of 3 or 5, or they could live in this small space. A lot of their living was on the deck above, if the weather was nice. Anyway, here we've got, they probably would have slept 2 in a bed, or, it was very cozy living. We think of this as being a little bit of an upscale cabin. Some of them were probably much sparer, but there were, with 1,000 boats on the canal, there would have been all kinds of homes. I'd like to point out the coal stove here, in that it would have been cooler in the, they would have needed it in the months of April and October and November, when the canal first opened and when it was getting close to closing for the season. So they were able to survive quite comfortably with this coal stove. We're standing on the towpath, and I just wanted to point out that the backside of the canal boat reveals that it's actually a pavilion, and it becomes our event space for Lock 31. We've hosted dinners for the society, as well as there's been bridal showers. We've had a wedding. It is for rent, and we hope the public will take advantage of this rather unique facility. We have tables and chairs for 80 people. That's the capacity underneath, and there's a space in back that can be converted into a kitchen. Anyway, it's a very simpatico space once you're in there. With the table set up, it just feels really nice in there. I'm standing on the towpath, and the towpath ran the length of the canal. It's where the mules would pull the boats. The way they built the canals was they would scoop out the earth and build the towpath. They would cut into the upside hill and remove the dirt and build it up on the towpath, and then they would line the upside with stone to keep the canal wall from collapsing. And As you can see, there's a tremendous amount of stonework, and this would have gone on wherever they needed to line the canal walls. And on this side, they would have lined the canal just at water level, so that it wouldn't erode the towpath. Canals traveled about 20 miles a day. That meant this kid, who is generally a 10-year-old boy, would be responsible for moving these mules, either riding or pulling them 20 miles every day of the season, more or less. Originally, the canal was open 24 hours a day, but they eventually closed it from midnight to 5 a.m. so the kids could get some sleep. It was kind of a tough life for the kids because, you know, if it was kind of a rule that if the boy and the mule fell into the canal, they would save the mules first because they could always get another boy. Oftentimes these were orphans from New York City. It was a very harsh reality, but without the mule, they were out of business. Without the boy, sad, but true. I'm standing by the lock at Lock 31. This was one of 37 in Pennsylvania. There was a total of 108. They started numbering from Port Jervis and up to Honesdale. The locks were originally a little bit shorter and a little bit narrower, and when the canal became more successful, the coal company was more successful, they needed to enlarge them, and so then they increased the length of them and the width of them. The way they worked was there were gates on either end. There wouldn't have been these stone walls on either end. That was post canal era. The farmers had to get to the back field, and so they built this road, and later the Parks Department said we should build this other connecting bridge to get people over to the towpath. Anyway, those would have been wooden gates, and they would close the downstream canal gate first. The canal would have filled with water. The boat would have flowed into the canal, and then they'd close that gate. There was always a little bit of a current coming, so there was this waste weir that diverted the water around the canal. Anyway, once the boat was in the canal and the gate closed, they would lower the water in the canal, and then the boat would go out on the 10-foot lower in elevation. And then a boat that would be below the canal would come into the canal, they'd close the gate, they'd fill the water level with from the upside, and then they'd open the boat would rise, and then it would flow out, be pulled out to the, going up the canal. This vantage point, you see the house behind me. The house is 1820, and it was here before the canal came through. The original owners of the house were lumbermen. They had this was all original growth forest, and so they were cutting these huge trees. They were able to make this very grand house. It's like a Connecticut farmhouse. It has a central hallway and 4 large rooms on the ground floor, and on the second floor there are 3 bedrooms and a ballroom. And then on the other side is the kitchen wing. The family that lived there had 8 kids. And they lived there for 2 generations, and then eventually it was bought by this grocer from Brooklyn, Mr. Heinze, and Heinze turned it into location, because he understood the importance of having all this traffic going by his front door. And so he had a bar and an inn. It was kind of a nightclub, and with adult entertainment. Anyway, he bought the building in 1876, and so when we're restoring the house, we're trying to tie it into the two eras of the family that lived there for 2 generations and Heinze. So we're aiming for 1875 in our restoration of the house, so we can tell both stories. Here at Lock 31, we have a little over a mile of the original canal, a little under a mile of the original canal. When you're standing by the house, we have about a third of a mile to the north and 2/3 of a mile to the south. And then we also have a trail that loops out along the river, and it's probably a 1/4 mile long. But what's interesting about that is it goes through all these little ecosystems. We have a pine forest in one area, and it's just kind of magical how it changes so much in such a short time. And then we also have the Cross Field Trail, which is one of my favorites because I'm originally from Iowa, and I'm used to big open sky, and it's really like one of the few places I can walk and see the sky. Anyway, it's in the spring, it's full of wildflowers, and you often see deer, and I mean, people have sighted bears here before.